Hi everybody, my name is Paul with Perfecto and I'm at Droidcon Boston today. That's, if you actually want to connect up, that's hashtag Droidcon Boss, B-O-S. And I'm here today with Sam Edwards.
So yeah, I'm Sam Edwards. I'm Handstand Sam on Twitter and everywhere else online. Today I did a talk on building debug features in your Android application. So strategies of doing that, things that you can do with it, and how to make sure that you don't ship those out and cause security concerns for release builds.
That's really cool. One of the things you talked about was being able to swap endpoints really quickly.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, I might be able to imagine how I could use it. But can you tell us a little bit about some of the reasons why developers might want to be able to swap out endpoints really quickly?
Sure. Yeah, so I talked about how having to make custom Gradle builds for small configuration changes just takes up time after time after time, because whether it's just you wanting to test something or somebody else from another team coming by, it takes up time to make builds. So in order to avoid those things, it's nice to add some sort of debugging feature in your app so you can change that without having to rebuild your app. So it's all about the time saving and not having to, it's a debug build, you can do anything you want. So you don't want to rebuild every time.
So if I hear you correctly, there are different types of ways you might want to actually run this app. So obviously in Android world, we can compile to different types or variants. And the debug, have you ever noticed that by default, like, we're just not putting the stuff in the right Gradle build or in the right place in the Gradle build?
So I think the Gradle build process is something that is kind of tricky in general. If you just think about any standard Android app, you put it in your main source folder or you make it a compile dependency and it goes out. And I think when you first approach this sort of thing, you'll realize, oh, I built this really cool debug feature, but if you look in your release APK, it's going to be there. So I'll go into the Gradle build variants in the talk and how you can leverage that to create a separate source directory that's called debug specifically and put your debugging code only in there.
Gotcha.
So that way when you release your APK, nothing's in there and you don't have the security concerns.
Yeah, and it's super clear to, like, just from a procedural perspective where I put my stuff as a developer. Yeah,
because you could do if-then statements, but then it's all baked in the main source code, where if it's completely separated, then it's very, like you said, it's very clear.
Yeah, so that's one of the pieces of research that I work on a regular basis is, like, what's really going to increase our efficiency? Is it just more tools? And sometimes it's process. Sometimes it's configuration, and sometimes it's convention. So that's really cool. Are there other things that we can do, particularly like at scale? It's one thing to have like a team of like 4 or 5 people just cranking on code. But at scale, with many, many different teams involved, are there common practices that we can employ to improve all of our efficiencies all at once?
Yeah, so I think like as you become a larger and larger team, as you're mentioning, you hit different problems. So as a small team, you have your own little problems, but as you get more and more people, you have more people working with the code, more people trying to do things. So I think you end up probably making more complex debug features to facilitate the needs for everybody that they're having. So you're not having to have everybody recompile all the time. And so it just ends up being more complex features and kind of more feature rich. But by doing that, you can help more people in your company as it gets to be bigger.
Very cool, very cool. So in your talk, and I was sitting there, as I was listening about your conversation around broadcast notifications, much like Intents, the first thing that occurs to me is how can I mess with somebody else's app? And so like you talked about custom launchers and being able to parameterize some of that stuff to simplify like demos and then also simplify some actual stuff that gets out to production. But really my question is around, are there security considerations that you would want to put in place if you're going to really encourage your developers to use the notifications, the broadcast notifications?
Sure. So broadcast receivers in general, they're going to be exported to the entire Android system. So this means if you're running something on ADB, you can go ahead and trigger a broadcast notification. Or if you're another application, whether you're a nice app or a mean app, you can send something in. So if you say, hey, I want to do something, I'm listening, and that's great. But it's not great if you get into production and you're saying there's security concerns. So what you can do is in your Android manifest, when you're describing your broadcast receiver, you say exported equals false. And by doing that, it closes the loop. So only broadcast notifications that happen with inside your application are processed and everything else is ignored. So the Android system won't even direct it into your app. Gotcha.
And so that means that as a developer, I just have to think before I actually put something out there. I have to put that flag on that stuff. Before I expect it to be completed.
Yeah, exactly. I think just being aware of what your APK looks like and what's available like during your release build is very important. I challenge every Android developer to go out there and decompile your app. The tool in Android Studio is APK Analyzer, and there's also Classy Shark.
Yep.
And both of those let you see what's in your APK. So think of yourself as somebody that's trying to do something malicious and see if there's anything of value there. Because as you said, like somebody's going to try to like send broadcast notifications to your app, especially if it's something super sensitive.
Yeah, maybe do internal hackathons or something like that. Just like
yeah, that's a great way for people to learn that sort of thing. Yeah.
So you mentioned a whole lot of tools in your talk, and
yeah,
that's awesome. I'm going to go through your slide
sure.
deck for the next week or so, and I appreciate that. But is there like one or two tools that you would give a shout out to for people before we actually get to your talk?
So the main one that I'd shout out to is one that requires the simplest amount of configuration and the biggest bang for the buck. It's called Stetho. It's an open source debugging library from Facebook. And the UI for it is actually the Chrome developer tools. So if you're a web developer, you're probably used to that. But what's nice is over ADB, you kind of tunnel into the app with Stetho, and you can see networking requests, look at shared preferences, modify them, look at databases, run queries. You basically have this inside view into your app and all these like kind of debugging capabilities that are just kind of come for free. You give Stetho your contacts and you say initialize, and then if you're using OKHTTP, then you can specify a network interceptor, so those networking requests are intercepted.
So on top of the existing Android tools and the debugging tools around that experience, you've got an extra set of tools to help you kind of inspect some of the
there are really a lot of tools in the open source community that are out there, and Stetho is one of those. Facebook is very generous to have open source that, but definitely want to leverage things that are already existing.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Sam. It was really good to talk to you. And again, for more information, just go on Twitter. Just go to the hashtag Droidcon Boss, and you'll see all these talks. The speakers have hashtagged their presentations and their slides, so you can go through those. And we look forward to hearing from you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks.